Aloha. The latest, well, it's not the last book I read. I read it about 2 books ago. But the book is The Murder of Alfalfa by Olivia Watson. It was I think I picked this one up on Kindle Unlimited. I bought a new Kindle. I went for the Paperwhite, and I got a 3 months free subscription to Kindle Unlimited, so I've been trying to use it a little bit. I can't recommend this book. The book is very short. I read it in an hour and a half, and there were inconsistencies in the book. There's not a lot written about his childhood. It's very glossed over. I would have liked to have read more about his experiences with our gang. And if you don't know, let me go back to the cover. Alfalfa was an Our Gang or Little Rascals character portrayed by Carl Switzer. Let me get the name right. Switzer. And very popular character. He's been made fun of a lot, and I didn't realize that he had been murdered, but in 1958, I think it was, he was stabbed to death. And the come on for the book is that it involves a bear, a dog, and $50. There wasn't really a bear involved. The dog was barely involved. And even the $50 was kind of, basically he was stabbed because he was trying to get drinking money out of a friend. And they got into an argument and fought, and he got stabbed. And if that ruins the book for you, sorry, but I think you would get this much information if you looked him up on Wikipedia. It really glosses over his childhood. There's not a whole lot written about it. There are a few instances of things that happened during the Our Gang years. There was only one quote from someone he worked with on the show. There weren't any interviews with anybody. I'm not even sure who's still alive anymore. I think Darla died just recently. But other than that, I haven't kept up on entertainment stuff, so I don't know who's around and who's not for the most part. At the end of the year, I always go and I look at the articles that say who we lost this year, and I look, and it's like always surprising because I haven't heard. One of the things, and there are things that make me question how much of this is true. In one section it says, and I'm going to quote here because you have to read it to understand it. Well, it starts out, one night in January of 1958, Carl Switzer decided to spend his evening drinking with some friends to help pass the time. Okay, and then it goes down, and it's still that same night in January of 1958. This is where he, somebody shot him, and this is just incidental to the story. It was a separate incident. He was out drinking with some friends, and they were all leaving the bar. He went one way, his friends went the other way. A shot rang out. He got shot in the shoulder, but nobody actually saw who did it. And so this is his friends now several yards up the road, blah, blah, blah. They heard the gunshot but hadn't seen who was responsible. All they had seen was a car screeching down the road and their friend laying on the ground bleeding. They rushed to his side as someone else yelled that they were running inside to call 911. in 1958, somebody's going to call 911. That's not going to get them very far. 911 did not come for, if anybody does not know this little factoid, 911 did not come into existence until late 70s, I want to say. Maybe early 80s. Yeah. So, then another one is, if I can get to the moat. Oh, that was that one. Okay, let me. Still getting used to this Kindle. And just the way it was written. Now I'm actually going to quote this whole sentence because you'll see why I'm questioning. While Carl Switzer's arrest in 1958 was his first time behind bars, it wasn't the first time in his life that his often behavior got him in trouble. Often behavior? Is it supposed to be awful behavior? I don't know. I have not been able to figure that one out. And let's see what else we have. I can't figure out how to scroll through the notes. So, let's see, here's one. Nope. Oh, it says he also had a supporting role on the Defiant Ones, which was a movie in the 50s. And I wanted to go back and look at that because I'm sure I've seen that movie, but I don't remember him being in that. But he would have been in his 30s at that time. It says he was 31. So I probably wouldn't have recognized him. Let's see. Switzer's alcoholism often drew acquaintances away. They never got to meet the real Carl. Drew them away? How do you draw acquaintances away? You draw them close to you, you push them away. That doesn't make sense. See, and so there are some things that just really are not see, this little bar does not, I don't know if it's just my fat fingers or if it's the Kindle or what it is, but I cannot get this bar for the notes to move down. So I know I have more notes in here, but every time I try to press that bar, the screen disappears. So I don't know where I have notes. Oh, here's one. Had he not wanted to kill the man, oh, this is supposedly a quote attributed to, where's his first name? Moses Stilts, who is the man who stabbed him. According to Stilts, he had acted in self-defense. He had not wanted to kill the man and let me start over. He had not wanted to kill the man and would not have had Switzer put the knife down and walked away. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't to me. He had not wanted to kill the man and would not have had Switzer put down the knife and walked away. Yeah. So if she's actually quoting him, there's something wrong there. So the story is that Carl was out drinking with his friend. Where's his friend's name? I just saw it. Jack Piott, P-I-O-T-T, Piott, I don't know how you pronounce that. Um, and he ran out of money for drinking. He wasn't doing very well. Um, Switzer was, he grew up in this Hollywood life. Well, mostly grew up. He was born in Illinois. And when he was, I think it was said he was um, 8 years old, or let's see, in 34, he was born in 22, so he was 12 years old when his family took a trip out to California to visit relatives, and him and his brother, who were very much into entertainment, they used to go out into the streets and dance and sing and get people to give them money, but they did it for the enjoyment of doing it mostly. They were just the kind of outward kind of souls that really like to show off and do that kind of stuff. So when they went to California, the two brothers begged their parents to go take them on a studio tour of the studio that was producing the Our Gang comedies at the time. And because those were big time money makers, those were, in every, it sounds kind of weird to say it, in every theater across the country. There weren't a lot of theaters at the time. So big money then compared to today is way different. Let's see. And that's what the two boys wanted to do, Carl and his brother. They wanted to be in the Our Gang movies. And so, let's see, where does it say? Oh, Hal Roach Studios. I should have known that, Hal Roach. Very big producer in the day. This would have been in the 30s, or 20s actually. And so, they went on the studio tour. They thought it was great. They stopped at the cafeteria. The two boys got up on the table and started singing and dancing. Happens Hal Roach himself is in the cafeteria, sees them, goes over and says, "I want to sign you." We hear stories about that all the time. Lana Turner in the drugstore malt shop, and younger generations may not hear these stories as much. We used to hear them all the time back in the 60s and 70s. So this is how they got into, Carl and his older brother. His older brother was 14 at the time, I think. They both got into the Our Gang comedies. And I didn't realize that Alfalfa hadn't been in the earlier ones. He came in late in the run. Oh no, it says Carl was 6 years old and Harold, his brother, was 8 years old. Sorry. The first Our Gang short that they were in was Beginner's Luck, if you want to look that one up. And Alfalfa was just a big hit. And so, but apparently it went to his head, and he became kind of a little bastard on the show. Behind the scenes, he was always pulling what he calls pranks on people who didn't always see it that way. Some of them were not nice pranks. Think jackass kind of pranks. And there was one I remember, he got mad. He didn't like to go to school in between. And that was something I wanted to look up to see if, even back in the 20s, if they had the law about minors having to go to school, because that's something she says in here that they have to do. But he didn't like to go to school, so he was always trying to cut school, trying to delay filming and things like that so that he didn't have to go to school. And one of the things he did was he urinated on some light equipment. And back then, light equipment was very hot. I remember my father was always taking home movies back in the days of 8 millimeter, and he had this light, and as soon as that light came on, the room just like increased temperature by 20 degrees. It was horrific. I can imagine what studio lights were like in the 20s. But he urinated on the lights, and then when they turned the lights on later and they heated up, everything shorted out. So the studio had to, you know, get new equipment, get new lights. They had to fix everything, the wiring, and it set production back. So, you know, these days he'd be sued for that. And he did jokes on the other kids that he worked with as well. But apparently they all claimed that if you made a friend with him, he loved you for life, he would do anything to back you up. You know, he wouldn't let anybody else hurt you. He wouldn't let anybody hurt you. You know, so even if he pulled pranks on you, you were a friend for life, and it would not go any other way. And everybody, according to this, everybody spoke very well of him, except that there are no quotes. So that's kind of hard to go back on and see. You know, I would have liked to see interviews with those people. There's only one, and it's from one of the kids who played, he said, it says a rich kid. It doesn't give the name of the character, and it doesn't even really say anything about him. It just says we all understood that we were under contract and that, you know, we had to go along with filming and stuff. Here it is, Tommy Bond, who played Butch. I remember Butch. If Carl liked you and was your friend, he loved you. There was no in between with him. When Carl loved you, he really loved you. He was the best friend you could have ever hoped for. And so, you know, but now what happened was that after the Our Gang comedies, and he grew up, started growing out of the cowlick, and everything that happened, his life kind of went downhill. He wasn't getting parts. He did some, you know, some TV and movie parts, but he wasn't getting the accolades and the love that he had gotten with the Our Gang. He went into raising and breeding hunting dogs and doing hunting guides, or he was a guide on hunting trips, and that wasn't really paying out a whole lot, so he continued to do the acting. But he fell in love with a girl, and they got married, and she got pregnant, and by the time the baby was a year old, he was an alcoholic. They were living back in Kansas, Kentucky, I'm not sure, somewhere that was not Southern California, Kansas, west of Wichita. And so he did not like that he did not have the limelight on him. He had trouble adjusting to being a farmer. Her father had bought them a little farm out there, and so she eventually kicked him out, and he wound up back in LA, and that's when all the trouble started with the continued drinking, and it got to this one point where, and this was in, sorry, I have to keep going through this because I can't get to my notes. 59, January of 1959. or it might have actually started earlier than that. Yeah, late 58. He was actually arrested for cutting down trees in the Sequoia National Forest. His idea was to cut them down and sell them as Christmas trees. So in early January, he was going to lead a bear hunt, and this is where the bear came in. He was getting ready to lead a bear hunt. He borrowed a hunting dog from a friend of his, Moses Stilts, and something happened between Stilts' house and his house, and the dog bolted. It like caught a scent and took off. I have a beagle. I know they do that. So Switzer spent time looking for the dog and couldn't find him. Put an ad up offering a $35 reward for the safe return of the dog. And a few days later, somebody called and said, "I have your dog." So he met this guy at a bar, of all things to do. Paid the guy the $35. Him and the guy had a beer, hit it off. He ended up paying the guy's beer tab of $15, so that there's the $50. And then Switzer returned the dog to his friend Stilts. And then in January, this was, I guess, earlier in December or maybe early January, on January 21st, 1959, Switzer was out drinking with friends and ran out of money. So while he's drunk, he thinks it's going to be a good idea to go get the $50 back from his friend, because after all, it wasn't his dog. Why should he have to pay for the reward and the guy's bar tab? So he goes to his friend's house with, along with another friend of his, this buddy Jack, whose name I can't pronounce. Then Switzer and Stilts get into a fight over whose responsibility it is to pay that, and somehow Switzer got stabbed, and it's all really murky. And she says right here, it's at this point in the story that the details become unclear. But then she only gives one outline of the story, which is that Stilts threw a clock at him, Switzer pulled out a knife and told him if he didn't pay up, he was going to kill him. So then they struggled, and somehow Switzer got stabbed, and the knife, a bloody knife, was found under him, a switchblade, a jackknife. Is that what they are? Switchblade, jackknife. But apparently the knife was not open. But she doesn't offer any other story, just that one. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And you know, for a book I didn't really like that much, I've gone on a long time about this. So you can decide for yourself, you know, if it's, I think you would get more information just by a couple of internet searches than I got out of this book. But because of the lack of information, the lack of interviews, the lack of the second side of the story of how he was killed, and the misinformation, like saying call 911, and the way she twisted up what appear to be quotes from people, I don't know how much of it is true. And you know, I thought it would be an interesting book. You know, it's how he was killed, but what is it? The Murder of Alfalfa. It sounds like it would be interesting, but there's just not enough information here to make it interesting. So I'm sorry, Olivia Watson, but you just need to put more information in. So that's my review.